Now, South Africa's exports have underperformed in the past decade. However, the National Development Plan targets that export volume should grow by 6% to achieve an annual increase in real GDP growth of 5.5%. In turn, to accelerate 11 million new jobs by 2030. But in order for South Africa to meet these targets, we'll need to fast-track its export performance. Well, let's speak to Catriona Purfield, who is the lead economist for South Africa, Botswana, Lesotho, Namibia and Swaziland from the World Bank. She's going to unpack the Export Competitiveness report that interrogates the country's export companies relative to peers in other emerging markets. It's so good to have you. Welcome to Morning Live.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right. Now, what would you say is behind the underperformance within the export industry within the country?
Well, one thing we did in our report was look at the performance of 20,000 exporting firms in South Africa over 12 years. And we find 5 facts that are underlying their underperformance. First, there's an overall underperformance of exports, and it doesn't matter which sector you look at. If you look at minerals, the volumes are underperforming. If you look at non-mineral exports, the growth is lagging well behind the BRIC peers, and the same for services exports. Now, one reason for this is that when we look at the structure of South African exports, we see at one extreme that South Africa has very big firms. Over 90% of its exports are coming from just 5% or 1,000 of these firms. However, at the other extreme, South Africa has about 20,000 tiny exporters that are only exporting a median value of about $29,000 a year. Now, why are these not growing is because these big exporters, these super exporters, are losing dynamism. They're not growing as fast as they used to be before the crisis because they're not innovating as much and they're not breaking into new markets as much as they should.
Yeah, I mean, let's have a look at the 3 areas that present opportunities and competitiveness and could grow when it comes to exports. What are those areas?
Well, what we tried to do in the report was identify 3 key areas of opportunities to boost export competitiveness. So one area we looked at was the boost that exports could get from deeper integration with the Africa region. If you look to East Asia, one reason why they did so well was they were able to produce these production networks that go across borders. South Africa could work with its neighbours to pool all the region's natural resources, to be able to produce similar production networks, to get cost efficiencies, and to be able to plug better into global production networks.
So it's better to work together as an entity.
Indeed.
We don't do that.
Well, there's various initiatives being negotiated, and I think the importance now going forward is to continue negotiation on the tripartite agreement to promote trade within the region, particularly to promote trade in services and in goods, and to remove the logistic border problems that one sees in the region, and to improve infrastructure connections across borders.
You know, we've got, obviously, when we think of the major exporters, obviously we're focusing on resources, minerals, mining. Why is that deteriorating?
Well, basically what we see over the last decade or so is that South Africa's mineral volumes haven't changed, but they actually have increased a lot in value terms. And I think basically South Africa is exporting, its export basket is half minerals. So it is actually exploiting a lot of its comparative advantage in its minerals. Over half its exports are minerals.
Okay, so that's yes. our obviously our biggest is the minerals.
Yes.
What else? Where are the biggest sectors of exports outside of minerals?
Outside of minerals, basically half is minerals, but if you look at automobile production is another, petrochemicals is another very large area, and also other areas that I think one could look at is light manufacturing. Agri-processing is also becoming quite important and quite dynamic, and this is important because the agri-processing is very labour-intensive. And we find in the report that actually South Africa's exports are very sophisticated, very high-tech, very high-skilled, when in fact, given the large pool of unemployment that South Africa has, it could focus more on these labour-intense products.
And obviously job creation is at the bottom of it all, because that's where we want to benefit. I mean, we were talking about, what are the figures? Accelerate 11 million new jobs by 2030. So agriculture is where you see this happening.
Well, basically, I think what South Africa needs to do is to find its niche within the labour-intensive kind of range of goods. And the best way to do that is to create an enabling environment for entrepreneurs to find their niche, to be supportive of them in ways, for example, by lowering the logistics costs of doing trade, We're finding that port tariffs in South Africa, if I'm a non-mineral producer trying to get a cargo out of the ports, I'm paying 3 times the global average.
Wow.
And this is undermining the competitiveness. So looking at these areas could do more to promote exports.
I mean, we've also got some of the most arable land in the world that is underutilized. And I know that this was highlighted by our AU chairperson, Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma. She spoke about that, and that was something that we really need to tap into. Arable land, that's where we make money. We've got a weak currency. We might as well make money off of it. I mean, I need to ask you before you go, this currency, because this has been probably one of the top stories of the year for us already. South Africa's currency, I know it's good for exports, but not for the rest of our day-to-day living.
Indeed, we do expect over time that a weaker rand or more depreciated rand should aid exports. But one also has to remember that a lot of exports are produced by imports and they become more expensive. And that's why we're underscoring, to get the gain from a more depreciated exchange rate, it's important to look at these supply-side constraints in power, and important to look at the infrastructure bottlenecks and to reduce these logistics costs to help support competitiveness.
Oh, so interesting. Thank you for talking to us.
Thank you so much.
It's an absolute pleasure having you here in the studio. Catriona Purfield is the lead economist at the World Bank when it comes to South Africa, Botswana, Lesotho, Namibia and Swaziland.